Hello, spooky friends, and welcome to another episode of the Scary-ish podcast.
Woo!
With Robin Grace and Adam Diaz.
Hello.
And we're going to tell you guys some cool stuff today, hopefully.
Indeed we are. I found a lot of stuff on mine, so it actually wound up being a much longer script than I thought it was going to be.
That's good, because mine's really short.
Right on. Then I'll go second, I guess, and you can go first. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate every single one of you that listens. And we are going to start off the show like we normally do with some homegrown horrors. So Robin, what are homegrown horrors?
And homegrown horrors are the stories of paranormal / spiritual /
kooky coincidences.
Yes, that have happened to you, your family, your friends, and cool things like that. So it's really nice because you guys go out of your way and send us these awesome stories, and we get to read them back to you.
Indeed. I'm actually really excited. We have 2 this week, like we always do. 1 for me, 1 for you. But thank you so much for sending these to everyone who sent them. And we have one that was sent, and it says, oh my God.
Unanimous?
That says, anonymous, please. And there's no problem with that. We'll make it anonymous. And if anyone wants to send us a story that they just want us to see to get some feedback, that's totally okay as well. We do get those from time to time. So if you have a story you'd like to share with us, you can email storytime@scarish.com. You can visit our website, scarish.com, which has a contact us button. Click that, and you can fill out a form, and it just sends us directly to us. And that's a way where you can do it without going into an email or whatever the case may be. Or you can just go to Discord if you want to share it with us for like some live feedback, because our Discord server is basically just like a chat application for those of you who don't know. And on scarish.com, there's all of our social media links. Just click it there. You can also message us on Facebook, which is facebook.com/scarish-podcast. If you go there, please click like. And you can join the Scary Spooky Friends group and post there for some instant feedback as well. Twitter is @scarishpod. Instagram is @scarishpodcast. That's a lot of stuff. So
that is
awesome.
A lot of stuff.
We are ready to get going. So Robin, why don't you take the lead?
All right. So this one is from Teresa, or I hope I said it right. Teresa. By the way, we're having like the worst day of technical difficulties going
Our internet's
on.
been out for like 3 hours. It's not supposed to come up for like another 3 hours, so
yeah,
it's been rough. We've been doing research on our cell phones.
Yeah, so researching on our cell phones, I had to print out my little script for the day, and then I printed it out wrong because I tried to do double-sided, so it totally is just... everything is wrong.
We're gonna make it through this episode. Fingers crossed. Knock on wood.
And it's freezing. It snowed today in Vegas. It was weird.
It's a bizarre day, without a doubt. This office is also super cold. Robin has on a blanket over her head, so she looks like an old lady that's reading a story right now. So it's pretty funny.
Just imagine your Baba telling you this story.
That's funny.
It goes, "Hey there, Adam and Robin.
Hello.
So I just finished your Halloween episode, and at school for Halloween, I read The Raven to the kids when we watched the Simpsons clip. We watched the Dracula and the Shining clip as well. The kids loved it. Spooky time. When I moved out from student housing with a few friends, we rented a house across the road from uni. It was a big, old, cold house, but cheap, so why wouldn't we live there?"
Right. That's the young
demons.
person. That's the young person thought, like, whoa, rent is $300 a month. This is the best place ever.
"I used to start work at 5 a.m., so I'd get up and leave before anyone woke up. Sometimes, when I was in the bathroom halfway down the long corridor, I'd hear the heater rattle like someone was walking past it. But when I looked, no one was there. Things progressed to doors slamming when everyone was sitting on the couch together. Bah humbug is probably just the wind." No, it's never just the wind.
It's just the demons.
One day, my roomie and I were watching a movie when someone knocked loudly on the outside door. I walked down the hallway to see, and I shit you not, darkness there and nothing more.
Get it? From the
Raven.
Well done.
Every time I would sit back down, there would be a knock again. Every time I answered, nothing was there. We moved out not long after that. The real estate wanted to do some renovations. Turns out it was a house that monks would live in before the university expanded out because it was close to St. Albert's Church for them. Have a nice day.
Wow.
Have a nice day.
That was kind of an abrupt ending, but thank you, and have a nice day to you as well. So, I don't know. I don't think monks would necessarily occupy like a haunted place. But I don't know. Maybe it's one of those things where they just happen to go somewhere that might have been like kind of scary, and you just happen to move in after them. But that's definitely a weird one. So thank you very much for that. We as kids used to call that ding dong ditch, where you'd go and ring someone's doorbell and run away.
And then you would just be darkness there and nevermore.
Yeah, we were darkness there and nothing more. We were really hiding behind a bush.
I said nevermore. I don't know why.
It's because like nevermore is the most popular thing from that story. But yeah, you just watch people come to their door and be like, "Oh, who's there?" And you go do it again. When I was a kid, though, no one ever got scared. They always got mad because they knew it was a kid messing with them. But yeah, don't do that to my house. You can do it to whoever you want. I don't care. But not us. So fun stuff. I'm going to move on.
Our doorbell doesn't work anyway, so.
Is that true?
Yeah.
When did it stop working?
It only works sometimes.
It's good to know.
Yeah.
So there's probably been a lot of guests that have like showed up. We probably have all those people that were always like, hey, Karen Gillan, hit me up. They've probably like David Tennant and Karen Gillan have come to our door, rang the doorbell, been like ready to bang. And then like no one comes to the door and they just go. They just leave. So bummer.
Yeah.
So hit us up again. I'm going to move on into my email, and its subject is sleep paralysis. And it starts out like this. Hi.
Hi.
Hello. I'd like for this to remain anonymous, and if you guys want, you can share it on the pod, and here it is. It's anonymous, and it's being shared on the pod. I found you guys through Spotify, smiley face. Shout out to Spotify. I really love the stuff you guys talk about, and I've always wanted to share one of my own stories. I feel like there's a lot of people, we've had a lot of people tell us to in like the chat or in Discord, like, I started to type up my email and then I got spooked, so I decided not to finish it, or it's a lot, so I don't type it up.
Some things just dredge up like stuff you don't want to think about. And so you're like, I'm going to stop. Don't really want to deal with it
Yeah, I totally understand it. And some of you folks are like, this is a really long story and it's going to take a while, so I'll wait. So you know what? Now's the best time. Just saying, like, it's all, there's no time like the present. So go ahead and finish that up and send it our way. Getting back to this. Meaning I'd like to share the only time I've ever had sleep paralysis, which was about last year and during August, I think. I had, quote, woke up.
You stay woke. Get it?
Talking like the kids.
Yeah.
Do we speak your language?
I'm hip. I'm in. I'm in with the cool kids.
That's so funny. Daka, 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 daka. That's me doing Dr. Evil from that. I can't remember which Austin Powers it was.
I don't remember. They all blend together for me.
They really do. I'm going to get us out of this. So they had just, quote, woke up, and immediately something felt wrong. The door was closed all the way, and there was a very faint light coming from the hallway from under the door. My bed was right next to the door, and as I have a fear of the dark, I tried to reach over to open the door a bit, and at that point I realized I had sleep paralysis. That's the worst when you finally try and move and realize, like, my body's not responding to my brain's commands.
And then you just start getting super scared and freaking out because you can't move.
Yeah.
At least that's for me. I don't know.
I always think I'm going to die because I feel like I can't breathe, but I realize, like, I'm kind of breathing, so I'll be okay. The email goes on. However, I couldn't move my right side of my body, and I could only move my left side. That being said, I somehow crawled out of bed in this dream. So it might be a dream. It might be that they're awake. I don't know. Maybe there's a surprise ending in store for us. My entire right side of my body weighing me down. I couldn't even open my right eye. I opened the door with my left hand and began making my way down the hall, still kind of dragging my right side, and I was about to reach the door at the other end of the hallway when I collapsed and everything went black. I know it sounds weird.
That's weird.
Yeah, it does sound weird. I know it sounds weird, and I know it doesn't sound like sleep paralysis if I could move, but I swear it was because I woke up the next day. The memory was not only still very vivid, I was also in bed.
So It's like you didn't actually move. It was like your brain, like nightmare kind of.
Yeah, almost like a nightmare mixed with sleep paralysis maybe, or maybe it was a nightmare about sleep paralysis. It's kind of hard to tell. I really love the stories and legends you guys talk about, and it'd be cool if y'all offered some sort of advice on what you think it was other than sleep paralysis. Love from Texas, smiley face, smiley face. I think it most likely was a mixture of sleep paralysis and maybe you fell back asleep and dreamed that you crawled down the hallway.
Right. Yeah, so it might have been a little bit of both. Definitely something horrifying, for sure.
And I'm not going to say that it's not a possibility that you actually did crawl down the hallway and fell asleep and then maybe you sleepwalked or walked back to your bed. I think I would like to think that that's not as likely because it's a lot creepier.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to go with you woke up, had sleep paralysis, fell back asleep, and you had that nightmare that you were crawling around your house.
Yeah.
Or apartment or whatever it was.
No, I think I agree.
Right on. So that's it for Homegrown Horrors for this show. So I think we're just going to go ahead and move right along into the topics.
Yeah.
So
I am going to go first. And because today, the day we're recording, is February 18th, 2019, it is President's Day. And because it's President's Day, I decided to do something fun and talk about ghosts of the White House / ghost stories surrounding the lives of presidents and stuff like that.
That's
so
really
it's a little
good.
bit of mix.
That's really fun.
Yeah. So I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard a lot of stories about like Lincoln and the White House.
Lincoln's the one I always hear about.
I actually read about a lot of things that I'd never heard before, and I think it'll be fun to share, and maybe hopefully you guys are kind of like, oh, that's cool.
Let's hope so.
And I definitely want to thank the White House Association for having this cool website that had a whole bunch of stories on there, and it was really helpful with this whole research thing.
Shout out to the WHA, good work.
And so, beginning, did you know that Mary Todd Lincoln, the wife of Abraham Lincoln,
No way.
was into spirit circles and seances and stuff like that?
I knew it, like, kind of, because I read it in Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, the book, and I wasn't sure if it was
That's
true or
not
not.
the same.
But apparently it was actually true. There's a lot of that book that's, like, based in reality, so the movie is definitely...
Oh, there goes gravity.
I hate you so much. The movie is definitely not like that, but yeah, I think I had heard that somewhere before.
Yeah. So in 1862 to 1863, after the death of their son Willie, she actually performed these rituals in the Red Room. And no, not the sexy kind of Red Room like in 50 Shades.
Move over, dildos, whips, chains, whistles, and yo-yos. We have
What?
a spirit board.
And where the heck do yo-yos come from?
You don't even want to know.
Okay. And in the presidential cottage at the Soldiers' Home, which, for those of you that don't know, was Abraham Lincoln's summer home during the Civil War. I didn't know. I had to go and look it up. I was like, what is this Soldiers' Home? I've never heard of it before. So that was kind of cool. And it's located adjacent to the National Cemetery, which is that big cemetery with all the military.
Is it Arlington National Cemetery? Or is that a different one? It's hard for me to keep track.
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Arlington's just one of the ones I know of that a lot of the soldiers are.
This one is the first military cemetery.
Probably not then.
Okay. Maybe then it's different than what I'm talking
Someone's probably like, it is. I'm going to tweet at you. At ScarishPod, let us know.
No, don't.
Don't be mean. I don't mind like getting informed of stuff we're incorrect on. I don't like it when people are like, ugh, idiot. Yeah, we might be dumb, but be nice about it.
We don't know these things. I'm not a historian. I'm telling you what I read. Okay, so blame the WHA.
Wow, now we said good work to them before, and now we're like, it's their fault if we're wrong.
So during the Civil War, spiritualism was incredibly popular, so many people were actually going out of their way to seek comfort after the loss of their loved ones, trying to connect with them and things like that.
Right.
With seance and spirit circles being performed in the White House, I don't think it's very surprising that ghost sightings and stories have grown around the place. I mean, so much history has gone through there that it's unavoidable, I think, to have some sort of spiritual energy in there.
Yeah,
you know?
It's a very old place with a very sordid, I shouldn't say sordid, that's not exactly true. I mean, it kind of is, but a very extensive history. And I think when you find places like that, sooner or later, you're going to find ghost stories.
Yeah.
So.
Lincoln actually attended only 2 of the seances that his wife held and actually foresaw his death on multiple occasions, even having a dream about it shortly before he was killed.
That's scary.
That is scary. But some people are like that. They have these premonitions, you know what I mean? And I think it's that medium psychic type thing. Some people just have that in them. And I know there are a bunch of skeptics out there that are like, I'm an atom. I just think
That's
it's
so
cute.
Are you an atom or are you a robin?
But I think that that's actually a thing. And I know my mom has dreams sometimes where she's like, don't do this because I had a dream that this would happen.
I think we've mentioned it before, but our favorite one was like, don't go near the ocean. I had a bad dream
I'm about to
it.
fly across the Pacific Ocean. Thank you. Anyway, I was totally scared. I was like, this plane's going down.
Yeah, I was really nervous to fly. That was like the most nervous I've ever been. Shout out to American Airlines for reinstilling my faith in the magic of flight. I was going to say, though, I really think a lot of skeptical people, like, they might actually be more sensitive type people to things like that.
Really?
But I think their skepticism blocks that fact. I think it's something...
Oh, so they're Rachel Weisz.
Yeah, I think they're Rachel Weisz. I mean, the one who's alive from Constantine.
Oh, shit.
Because she's in that movie twice, if you didn't pick up on that.
Because her twin sister. If you guys haven't watched Constantine... Go watch it. It's so good.
Someone's going to watch it and hate it and be like, I can't believe you made me waste my time
Not
on
the
this.
TV series, okay? The movie with Keanu Reeves.
Honestly, I also really like the TV series.
I like the TV series too, but what we talk about most of the time is from the movie, not the TV series.
With Kukanu.
Yeah, so Keanu Reeves. I think I had a dream with Keanu Reeves in it the other day.
Yeah, I heard a lot of loud moaning in the middle of the night, so you must have.
Shut up.
That's
Get
a good joke.
Here.
I'm pretty proud of that.
Anyway, during 1901 to 1904, a man named Jeremiah Jerry Smith was working at the White House during the Grant administration, and the man claimed to have seen ghosts of Lincoln, Grant, McKinley, and even several first ladies, which I think is pretty cool.
I think that's crazy because he was there during the Grant administration.
I think he started. He started during the Grant administration.
Okay, right on.
And so went through, and he worked at the White House for 34 years.
It's a very volatile time back then, so I could see that.
So
I wonder, you know what? I've always been skeptical of this, and I always say, like, why would they haunt that place? That's not where they died. That doesn't make any sense because I'm attached to a certain rule set. I wonder if you wind up maybe haunting, or maybe there's like an impression of you after you're gone of the place that you were most stressed in your life, or like most of your energy was spent, that also would make sense why people are seen at places where they like didn't necessarily pass away but spent a big portion of their life.
There's a movie that I watched on Netflix that I've brought up before that
I remember it. I know which one you're going to talk about.
Right? The I wish I remember what it was called.
Premonition?
No, I don't think it's Premonition, but it's about a woman who moves into a house with her husband and weird things happen around the house. Things go on like weird. She thinks it's paranormal things going on. And in the end, spoilers.
Spoilers for this movie.
The movie we can't name. So this movie has Amy Adams in it. She moves into this house. Weird things happen. There's this distinct whistling that she hears that she's like, oh man, what is this whistling? And then eventually in the end, spoilers, sorry, that these people come over and it's like a home invasion sort of thing. They come to the door. They're like, hey, we need help. They come into the house and then this big, huge thing happens. People get hurt, you know.
There's a traumatic event.
It's a traumatic event. And that whistling she heard was because she put water on in a kettle on the stove. And
it's like the event reverberated through time, like
exactly.
back and forth.
Yes. And I'm pretty sure I brought it up on the podcast before, but it was such a good movie for me because it was something different.
Right.
It wasn't ghosts or anything like that I watched so many movies about. It was more human and it was more time and space. And it was just really neat because you would see early in the movie, you'd see like chairs moving and stuff like that. And then...
Oh, wait, I've seen this. At the end, it turns out it was Matthew McConaughey.
No,
all along.
Shut up. You'd see chairs moving on their own. And then at the end of the movie, you see her grabbing the chairs because she's getting dragged across the floor. She's pulling the chairs out from where they are. And that's the chairs that you see moving by themselves earlier in the movie. It was just really neat.
And you're not going to spoil the actual resolution of the climax of the movie. So at the very least, you can still go watch this movie and then let us know what the name is so we know.
But it's really good. You guys should watch it. It's something different. If you want to see something that doesn't end in ghosts and demons.
And the predictable,
really cool.
scary horror
Right.
fashion.
I really enjoyed it. I just brought that whole movie up because you were saying how these ghosts show up in different places.
Right.
It to me, that movie really resonates with me because I'm thinking it's just echoes of their existence in time. Like I'll tell you later about Andrew Jackson doing things. And it's because it's just his personality, I think, that echoes through time.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of evidence of something like that where it's, and I've mentioned it before, like people that go to buy a house just go into a house, they're like, yeah, we don't want to live here. Or they won't even go into a house because they're creeped out by it.
Yeah.
And like people that know realtors, they have stories where it's like, yeah, something bad did happen in that house. And before I even mentioned it, the people decided that they didn't want to go in, they didn't want to see it, and they just walked away from it. And you see that a lot with haunted houses where it's like no one ever moved in again after that. It's like it's a property that people would, of course, have money to flip. They might want to make some money, but some people are just like, you know what? Let's condemn this one and tear it down. So that sort of stuff does happen. But
yeah.
I'll let you get back to President's Day stuff.
Okay.
Was it President's Day? Is that the name of that movie?
No.
Wouldn't that be nuts? Oh my God.
No, it was not President's Day. Willie Lincoln actually died in the White House of typhoid in 1862.
It's so sad.
Why?
He was so young.
He was very young. He was like 11.
Yeah.
He was a little kid.
The book is very sad too. Abraham Lincoln. It's just like all the things that happened back in the day. It was always like typhoid or cholera and
the black
shit. But in the book, it's like if you take even a drop of vampire's blood on your tongue, you will die. Like you're going to get sick and die.
So
immediately.
It's not like Vampire Diaries where it heals you.
No, and pretty much everything else where it heals you, it's legit poison, and it's like he sees, spoilers for Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, but he sees his mom get killed by a vampire when he's very young. Doesn't really know what happens. Gets older, experiences like paranormal stuff with a vampire. Someone takes him in and tells him the rules, and then because he becomes president, they start targeting him, and he has like secret service that are supposed to protect his family because he knows he's going to get targeted, and he looks out the window and sees like something has lured the guards away from his kid, and then he looks back out there and he sees like what he knows to be a vampire, and he runs out there, and the vampire ran away, and he asks Willie like, what happened? He's like, he made me taste something on my tongue, it didn't taste good. And he sits next to his bed. It's like a whole chapter about Willie dying.
Oh,
and it's so
man.
sad because it's like they take so much of like his actual trauma in his life, and then after that in the book he's like he has friends that are
vampires.
That's
why people like the book.
It's really good. He has friends that are vampires. They're part of his secret service, and they were supposed to be protecting him. And he tells them, it's such a good book, though. And he tells them after that, he's like, I know you're good, and I know you've tried to protect me.
This is like leading into the movie podcast territory.
Right? And he flat out tells them, though, he's like, but you all need to leave because from now on, every single vampire I see for the rest of my life will die. It's like, you need to get out of the house right now because I will kill every single one of you. And it's so sad.
And this is where he meets Howard Stark.
Yeah, that's exactly how it happens. No, it's really sad, though, because like if you actually look into Lincoln's life, so many of his family died. And they just died like these horribly tragic circumstances. And it was always just like a sudden onset of disease and they were gone. And they take all those actual deaths from his life and they just toss him into this story that's like really riveting. So if you saw the movie and hated it, read the book. It's amazing.
Yeah, everyone. Okay, maybe not everyone, but a lot of people that have read the book and watched the movie were like, the book is a million times better.
It's just it's completely different. It really is.
All right, back to more President's Day.
Sorry about that. Shout out Abe Lincoln.
So his ghost, Willie's ghost, has been seen by staff members of the Grant staff during the 1870s. This is totally not surprising to me considering Mary wanted to contact her son, And I think performing seances in the White House really didn't help. It's like, come at me, spirits.
Yeah, anytime you perform a seance or a ritual to summon spirits in a house, that house might have some bad mojo residue on it.
Maybe. Oh, have you watched Residue? We have watched Residue, right?
Which one is Residue?
It has Ramsay.
Ramsay Snow.
Oh, the bastard.
He eventually becomes Bolton, but whatever. Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
I've only seen like the first 2 episodes, and I think the rest you
I
watched
think
without me.
that show's cool because it has OSHA in it, and it also has Ramsay Bolton.
There's a lot of Game of Thrones actors that make their way
they all work together
back into series.
All right, anyway, so...
This is the TV show podcast we're yet to even discuss yet.
So in 1911, it was reported that a spirit of an unidentified 15-year-old boy that they called the Thing frightened President Taft, and his staff. So I think that's kind of interesting.
William Howard Taft?
Yes.
I think there's only one Taft. I'm not even sure if that was his correct name. I think I just threw together 3 names, so
No, is it Harry? No, that's Truman. I don't know.
That's Harry S. Truman. I know that one for sure.
So I personally was like, how would you even know the exact age of this thing? But I guess someone was like, it's around 15 to 14-year-old spirit. I'm like,
trust me, I know these things.
It doesn't make sense to me, but you never know. Maybe they did have a psychic come in and tell them. But apparently, President Taft's military aide, a Major Archibald Butt. Yes, his name was Butt.
Nice.
He wrote to his sister, Clara, quote, the ghost, it seems, is a young boy about 14 or 15 years old. They say that the first knowledge one has of the presence of the thing is a slight pressure on the shoulder, as if someone were leaning over your shoulder to see what you might be doing, end quote. I think that's very not so threatening. If someone was just like...
It's an invasion of space, so I think for some people like that do not like to have people enter their space, especially if you're not expecting it and no one's there, you would definitely be shocked by it, and more people might just be like...
I've been scared multiple times today with Lindsay just walking up.
Just by doing research and having someone walk in and be like, hey, like, cable's not working. So
Taft warned Butt that if anyone... Why are you laughing?
It just sounded funny.
Taft warned Butt that if anyone were to tell stories or spread these tales about the thing, that they'd be fired. But so much for that, right? Because
we're talking about it now in 2019.
Well, Butt was all about sharing all that jazz.
Eat a butt.
So, oh my goodness. And then here are a bunch of ghosts that have been sighted or are said to haunt the White House. So, Abraham Lincoln, sometimes labeled as the White House ghost because he's seen most often. This one is probably the most common that you'll hear about, or is usually brought up first when people talk about hauntings of the White House.
I love Abraham Lincoln. He's just so cool.
He's a cool vampire
hunter. He's supposed to be like a really boring character in real life, but he was like, he thought he was ugly, like he was supposed to not be very attractive. And someone at one point, like in public, called him two-faced. And he told him, like, if I was two-faced, why would I wear this one? That was his, like, witty response to someone. I'm just like, that's just so funny. So I can imagine him as a ghost, if he was supposedly, like, as unattractive as they say he was, being kind of haunting.
There's one time where Churchill was bathing in a bathtub in one of the rooms, and he got out, he's naked, smoking a cigar like Churchill would do. And he stepped out of the bathroom naked, and he saw the ghost of Abraham Lincoln leaning up against the fireplace. And he was like, hello, Mr. President. You seem to have caught me at a disadvantage
That's
because
funny.
he's naked. And then Lincoln just disappears.
And
So-
Abraham Lincoln said, "Nice dick," and then disappeared.
So, yeah, I think he has his own sense of humor in a way. Or his spirit does, at least. I don't know. So, it's said that he has appeared to guests in, you've guessed it, the Lincoln bedroom. Mark, mark. Get it? Because it's like his...
Yeah, his bedroom.
His footsteps are said to come from this room. President Truman, as well as his daughter Margaret Truman, were once awakened by knocking on the bedroom door while they were staying there once. In a letter Truman wrote to his wife that is actually archived in the Presidential Library and
That's
Museum.
awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty neat.
Good research. I love things that are archived.
Thanks the internet. That didn't work today.
Thanks your cell phone.
He says in the letter, quote, I jumped up and put on my bathrobe. It was 4 a.m, by the way. So I jumped up, put on my bathrobe, opened the door, and no one was there. Went out and looked up and down the hall, looked in your room and Margie's, still no one. Went back to bed after locking the doors, and there were footsteps in your room, whose door I'd left open. I jumped and looked and no one there. The damn place is haunted, sure shootin'. Secret Service said not...
Sure as shooting. That's the best expression I've ever heard.
Secret Service said not even a watchman was up there at that hour. You and Margie better come back and protect me before some of these ghosts carry me off, end quote.
That's adorable. I love that. That's so good.
I totally understand that some of what he said is probably in jest. It's just a joke. But I honestly feel like he was afraid of being alone.
I think there was something creepy that happened to him.
Yeah.
Like he might have like covered it up with humor. Where it's like, come back and protect me. But he's like, seriously though, something creepy happened.
Yeah.
And even the Secret Service were like, nope, you were alone.
Hearing weird things when I'm alone would freak me out, especially in a house as big as the White House. And Ronald Reagan's White House curator, Rex Scouten, said that Reagan's dog,
Reagan.
would go anywhere except the Lincoln bedroom.
Wow.
He would sit outside the Lincoln bedroom and just bark at it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's not just like he's avoiding the room. That's he actively does not like that room.
Yeah.
That's creepy.
It's crazy. And then there's the yellow oval room, which I didn't even know that there were different colored oval rooms, I guess. There must be the same like floor plan on each floor, and so each floor has its own oval room maybe.
I don't even know how it works.
I
I
have
just
no
know there's
idea.
a red room where all the weird shit goes down.
BDSM bedrooms? No. Please, I didn't mean it like that. Anyway, so yeah, I didn't know that there were different colored oval rooms, so there's a cool edgy nugget right there. He's been seen staring out the window of that room.
Like he's about to drop the hottest album of 2019.
Yeah. And you know what else happens in the yellow oval room is Thomas Jefferson's supposed violin playing.
Wow.
And I don't know if he was good at it
I was
or
about
not.
to say,
but
is he good? Because that could be awesome or
I
haunting.
couldn't tell you. But the First Lady, Grace Coolidge, Prime Minister Winston Churchill, and Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands have all claimed to have seen Lincoln's ghost. The Queen had actually heard footsteps outside her bedroom and went to see what it was, only to find Lincoln in a coat and top hat standing in front of her when she understandably fainted.
Wow, that's
yeah.
like a actual reaction right there.
Eleanor Roosevelt, wife of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. I'm dropping all this information on you guys in case you've never heard of them. You should have. FDR is a big deal. But he never claimed to have seen Lincoln, or she never claimed to have seen Lincoln, but that she felt his presence throughout the White House. The Roosevelt's family dog would also bark at nothing, and they assumed that he was barking at Lincoln's ghost. What's funny is that he's not only said to haunt the White House, but even his old law office in Illinois. So Lincoln gets around. And I think that's another thing with just him echoing throughout history because he had such a big presence.
He's such a powerful presence.
Right. And I think that's why spirits can be seen in different places.
This is just bringing up a lot of things in my brain from different things that I've read now, and I'm just going to let us move on before I go into the whole Wheel of Time theory and how that relates to the real world.
So there is supposed...
I know one person, the snark right now is like, no, say it! He's the only person I know that listens besides maybe one or two others that have read the full Wheel of Time series.
There's supposed evidence. You bought me book 1, and I still haven't gotten through book 1.
It's okay. It's 14 books long, so...
I've read like 50 books on my Kindle this.
Oh,
like,
there's more than that. You've
Yeah,
read so
I
many
know.
books since you got that thing.
But I still won't finish The Wheel of Time. It's horrible. And I'm still on book 2 of Game of Thrones. I watched the whole series. I told myself I wasn't going to watch until I read. And I couldn't read. I just ended up watching
It's
it.
weird. You hit a roadblock at the end of book 2 and
Yeah.
you have not moved past
Yeah.
it. So
Yeah.
book 3 is when the Red Wedding takes place, though. So it's probably a good spot to stop if you don't want to be traumatized.
Okay. So there is supposed evidence of his ghost, Lincoln's ghost, in a photograph of Mary Todd Lincoln by someone named William Mumler. And it's a photo of her just sitting there. And it's has a pretty distinct like silhouette standing behind her. It's really tall. It's a really tall silhouette standing behind her. And it honestly, to me, doesn't look like Lincoln at all. It doesn't look like Abraham Lincoln. And
When they show it on, do they show it on tours and they're like, look at these
oh my gosh.
photographs.
Yeah, every time it doesn't make me laugh. Anyway, Mumler's photographs were thought to be hoaxes. So he was pointed out like, you've been using double exposure, whatevs. But despite that, a paranormal researcher by the name of Melvin Willen wrote about it in his book called Ghosts Caught on Film. It says,
I can't imagine why he would write about that like it was a real thing.
he says that the photographer had no idea who she was, thinking that it was a Mrs. Tundle. Apparently, Mumler didn't find out who she was until after the photo was developed. And I can kind of see that being true, but you never know. We'll never know, you know?
You have to take someone's word for it, you know what I
Right.
mean? And when it looks like double exposure, you're kind of just like, yeah, this does look fake. But at the same time, it's like it's so hard to tell. Just keep your skeptic hat on.
But it doesn't look like him.
Keep your mind open with your skeptic's hat covering
If you'll probably post it on Instagram later or whatever, but
Yeah.
the photo does not look anything like him at all. It just looks like this weird tall dude. Just saying.
I'm going to use the hashtag look at this photograph when I put
Oh
up the
my
episode
goodness.
on Instagram.
Andrew Jackson supposedly lays in bed in the Queen's bedroom, also known as the Rose Room, and lets out a loud laugh that can be heard throughout the White House. In the Rose Room, there's even an inexplicable cold spot on the canopy bed in the room where Jackson slept. Mary Todd Lincoln, she's everywhere, claimed to have heard Jackson stomping around and swearing. A lot of people have said that, actually. And I could see it just having been her wanting to connect everything in a spiritual way because she was pretty spiritual, trying to contact her son and things like that. And
Right.
just wanting to connect things to it. But you never know. Maybe it was true. Maybe it's just her mind.
Another thing, too, is I know a lot of people like question the sanity of Mary Todd Lincoln.
Really?
Yeah, because like near the end of her life, people were like, oh, yeah, she's like batshit. But I think a lot of times, too, in the past, when you had people that had more of an open mind that would talk about things that people were uncomfortable with, they would immediately jump to that person is crazy, you know? I think times were a lot more judgmental. We've done so many stories about, especially like the 1800s, where it's like, oh, that person had a husband who was a con man and stole stuff from her. Let's harass her until she kills herself. Like, that was just the idea that they had in their head, where it's just like, regardless of whether or not there was something that was someone's fault, or they said something that was just plausible but not like super like rooted in reality, people's reactions were just much, much different back then. So I always wonder about stuff like that when you hear about a person. Like, I had to do it for my research, where it's like, yeah, this person was insane. And I was like, were they insane, or did they just say things that made you uncomfortable that you didn't want to hear?
Yeah, I think it's just people not understanding that idea, and they don't want to accept it, so they say things that aren't necessarily true. They just say it so many times that people think it is.
Right.
So, I don't know.
Like, I don't want to look at this photograph. Every time I do, it doesn't make me laugh.
Okay. That being said, Harry Truman wrote to his wife in June of 1945, 2 months into his first term, that, quote, I sit here in this old house and work on foreign affairs, read reports, and work on speeches, all while listening to the ghosts walk up and down the hallway, and even right here in the study. The floors pop and the drapes move back and forth. I can just imagine old Andy and Teddy having an argument over Franklin, end quote. Andy being Andrew Jackson, Teddy being Theodore Roosevelt, and Franklin being Franklin Roosevelt. So I think it's kind of hilarious.
Hilarious.
Yeah. It's just something that could be him just saying that, just like
metaphorically speaking.
right, metaphorically. But at the same time, maybe he did hear stuff. You never know. That's the hard part about this is like, it's not just out there like, I heard things.
Well,
and
when
I
you're
saw
in a place
things
with
and-
such history, like you can't help but feel the weight of the ghosts of the past that have been there before. And especially
Right.
Truman in his first couple of years. That was the end of World War II. They were trying to figure out what the hell to do about Germany. Like it had been divided up between us and Russia. Like there was a lot, or USSR at the time, but there was a lot going on. And when you're that max level stressed and you have to think about like, I'm sitting here, and before this, like, FDR was here during World War II, and whoever it was during World War I, and, like, Teddy Roosevelt was there. Teddy Roosevelt got shot when he was trying to give a speech one time, so obviously his life was stressful, and Lincoln was there during the Civil War, so it's like, you kind of can't help but feel the weight of all those people that have come before you,
Yeah.
and be like, I have to do a good job, and if you hear squeaking and popping and the moving of drapes, you're going to be
It's
like,
just my hips.
this place, that's funny. This place is haunted AF. So, yeah, I get that as a metaphor, and I also think he was kind of being literal with it.
Yeah. A woman named Anna Surratt is said to bang on the doors of the White House, pleading to see Andrew Jackson. And apparently, there was a time when her mother Mary was labeled as a Lincoln assassination conspirator.
Wow.
And so Anna was begging for her to be pardoned. Spoiler alert, she didn't get pardoned and was later hanged. Anna is also said to be sitting on the front steps of the White House every July 7th, the anniversary of her mother's execution.
Wow.
Yeah, that's kind of cray-cray.
I wonder if she was begging for her to be pardoned because she didn't do it, or she was just like, look, it's not such a big deal. It's just a president.
Look
you
at this
know?"
photograph.
That's good.
So William Henry Harrison, the first president to die in the White House, is said to haunt the attic.
Oh, the attic? That's no fair, man.
Yeah.
Everyone else gets to walk around on the grounds. They're like, Harrison, yeah, you're going to have to go to the attic. He's like, oh, bummer.
Here's another edgy nugget. He was also the shortest serving president. He died of pneumonia a month after his inauguration.
Oh, bummer, dog.
Yeah.
How tall was he?
I don't know why.
I feel like I need to know who the shortest president was, like what the height was of the shortest president.
What?
Oh, man, you meant short as in term.
I literally said shortest Oh, I see what you're saying.
It still makes sense in my brain as
Yeah.
like the shortest president. I need to know who the shortest president is
He
now.
only had a month-long term.
The shortest term. That's hilarious because I have a very short term for my thing as well. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
hilarious.
So several presidents have reported unexplained noises coming from the attic above the Oval Office. And it's said that Harrison is rummaging up there looking for something. Poor dude.
It's probably the door so you can get downstairs to hang out with all the other presidents. Like, I'm important too.
He may not be alone, though, because a security guard during the time of President Truman reported to have heard, quote, "I am David Burns," end quote, coming from the attic.
I'm saying this for our listeners because clearly I know, but who is David Burns?
David Burns was the man forced to surrender his land in order for the White House to be built. And I'd be pretty scorned if I were him.
I'd be miffed, but at the same time, it's like, this is going to be the place where the president lives. And there was so much land at the time. And by the way, none of it was actually his.
I say haunt the crap out of it. You go. In the basement, there's said to be a demon cat that resides there. Some report seeing a little kitten, but as soon as they get closer, it becomes a huge beast. I think you've covered that in an episode before.
I've covered demon dogs.
Oh, okay.
And demon like creatures like that, but I don't think
Okay.
I've covered this one specifically.
All
I
right.
will say that that's pretty interesting that it's like meow and you get closer like, oh, cute kitty with red eyes.
Your soul.
And then it just, oh god. We watched Annabelle Creation again and it's like, this is a good movie because there's so many practical effects, but this CGI.
Whenever it goes into the parts with the CGI, it just ruins the movie. If
It
they
really
hadn't
does.
put that stuff in there, it would have been great.
For any young movie makers, like something simple as keeping your camera like stationary.
Think of Star Wars. Star
and-
Wars Episode 4. Like, all practical effects, super simple. It wasn't super crazy CGI back then.
That was different too because he had like cells that he'd move along a board. But I'm
Yeah.
talking about something as simple as like you keep a doll on a bed, which is, I mean, this happens in Annabelle Creation. All they did was kept a doll on a bed. They shot a scene. And then they like in the movie, the way you see it, they cut away to someone's reaction and they cut back. And realistically, all they did was have someone walk over there and turn the doll's head so it's looking at someone. And then when you actually edit the movie, it's just like blah, 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 blah. Then it cuts to someone else's face, then cuts back. And then the doll is looking at you. And it's like, that is completely free. There's no CGI in that.
Yeah.
But it's terrifying. And
Yeah.
it's way more terrifying than like a CGI face turning into a demon where it's
Right.
like, your soul.
Yeah.
I was like, is this Shang Tsung? What the hell just
Shanks.
happened? Your soul is mine.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, I haven't watched that movie in so long.
It's a crazy documentary. I can't believe all that stuff took place.
Anyway,
The documentary
so,
Mortal Kombat, obviously. Go watch it.
Little Kitten. turns into big beasts when you get closer. It's said that this demon cat is a warning. When it appears, it means a great national disaster is going to occur.
It's a Mothman.
I've heard this legend before, and I think it's pretty cool. Apparently, there's a legend the cat was supposedly seen before a big stock market crash in 1920s and before the JFK assassination.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was going to say, that stock market crash is the big stock market crash.
That led into the Depression, the Great Depression.
That was the beginning of the Depression. I mean, like, that really is the day that they pretty much mark as the beginning, but all the other stuff had led up to it.
Yeah.
But still, yeah, that's nuts.
Supposedly, hauntings and ghost sightings have decreased significantly since renovations in the White House in 1952.
Because they brought in someone and they're like, remove all these cursed objects, please.
There was an interview that I read on one of the sites. I wish I would have typed it out, but it was on my phone, so I was like, but someone was saying that they had the spirits with them and kind of felt like they weren't alone when they were at the White House by themselves overnight. And after the renovations, they were super sad because they had no one to hang out there. It's like they felt that the spirits were gone.
Aw.
So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Maybe they're at rest. That's the only way that's not sad, is if like they're at rest. Maybe they're like haunt the parking lot.
Or they're
now
just
and it's
like,
too noisy,
I
no
hate
one
what you did with
notices.
the wallpaper. Get fucked.
That's hilarious.
Anyway, so bonus creepy story that doesn't really have to do with the White House, but when the British burned down the home of President James Madison and his wife Dolly in the War of 1812, they moved to the Octagon House on the corner of 18th Street and New York Avenue Northwest, making it the temporary White House. There have been unexplained occurrences there that have linked to the death of 3 women, 2 of which were the daughters of the man that had built that house. And supposedly, they both had argued with their father about who they wanted to marry, and then conveniently fell from the same staircase as each other. So
you think they're like choking each other like, he's mine,
No.
bitch?
I think at different points in time, one fought with their dad. They ended up falling down the staircase.
Oh, okay.
And then later in time, that one fought with their dad. And then they fell down that same exact staircase.
That just sounds like a really bad dad.
Or it's something like Buffy.
Ugh.
Where where it's that episode with the prom where the ghosts take over people and force them to relive
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, well, who knows? But terrifying screams and groans can be heard emanating from that house. Some even insist that on certain days it's impossible to cross the hall at the foot of the stairwell without going around some unseen obstacle on the floor. And this was all in a Washington Post article in 1969.
Wow.
So they actually printed about this stuff. And I think it's really interesting to see how much people thought about this stuff back in the day. I feel like articles now don't get printed like, believe this. It's more like skeptical. You know what I mean?
I think everyone nowadays thinks they fucking know everything because like they have some information readily available at their fingertips, and rather than do like any actual research into the other side, they find whatever thing matches their opinion at now. Like wherever your opinion is like defaulted to, you're just going to do research to support that. And that's why most of those things don't get printed, because there's so many people who are like, if they're going to be skeptical about this, they're not going to change their minds just because you provide them with evidence of something like that.
Right. I think, well, a lot of people now only post about grisly murder and stuff anyway, because true crime is in.
It's true. You know, it's all based in facts where it's like, can you believe this actually happened?
But like Amityville Horror type
Right.
stuff, you know what I mean? Like weird things happened, but it has to do with a murder. It's not like this place had a whole bunch of history, ghosts. It's more like a whole bunch of people got slaughtered here, and maybe it's haunted, or maybe demons
I feel like
did
you're
it.
talking bad about my topic that I'm about to
Oh
get
shit!
into.
Sorry. Okay.
It's funny because Amityville Horror had Ed and Lorraine Warren go there, and my topic is going to be a place where Ed and Lorraine Warren also went to.
Shit.
And I realized I left that out of my script, so I'm gonna have to remember what it said and just toss
Okay.
that in there at one point.
Okay, but happy President's Day.
Happy President's Day. That was really, really good. So good work with that. It's possible you should have gone second. Because that one was actually really good and kind of long, and I feel like mine's going to go by really fast, but we'll see.
Okay.
So I guess I'll just move into mine then.
Yeah.
So this week, I really thought about doing a cryptid. I have one that's been sitting on the shelf for a little while. I've done a lot of research, but I decided to wait because I really did enjoy last week in digging up information on a haunted location. And it's funny because when I wrote this part of my script earlier today, I was like, I hope this one is as fun as last week, and it actually was more fun. And I wound up saying, like, let's go back and look at some of the places I've checked into and later dismissed, but like bookmarked to like go back to it at a later date. So I did, and a friend of mine actually gave me or lent me, I can't remember, and I'm sure like that happens to some of you people where it's like they gave it to me and I can't remember whether or not it was like on loan or it's mine now. But in any case, he transferred possession of a text that has a plethora of inspiration, and this topic was in there. And this topic is Dudley Town.
I think we have multiple books that are his.
We do. We have two sitting right behind me. But this is Dudley Town, Connecticut.
All right.
So, and in fact, like I might just name this episode or this part The Curse of the Dudleys versus Dudley Town, because so much of this...
It's because they treated Harry Potter like shit.
I hate you so much.
And they deserve it.
I mean, this does start out in the UK, so that kind of does make sense. But here's the thing about Dudley Town.
Did the kid under the stairs curse them?
No, God. It's just going to be nothing with Harry Potter references.
Yes!
I have seen this topic floating around, and it's always floating around like the most haunted places in the world lists, like in one way or another. And like a cursory check into the story or just like a surface level bit of research, I didn't really see anything that grabbed me. But I checked this resource that was given to me, and it's also known as, of course, World's Scariest Places, Haunted, Creepy, Abandoned. So it's just another listing like that. And it had some information that I didn't see previously. So I was like, oh, shout out to Steve. Like, this is some good shit. And now I have more of a story to like kind of dig into. And once I did, and the onion's layers started to unravel for me, it started to get really interesting.
Donkey?
So I guess... no, I'm the ogre. I'm Shrek. I almost forgot Shrek's name, for God's sake. I had to call him the ogre for a moment.
Were you going to call him Mike Myers or something?
No, I honestly couldn't remember the name for a second. But anyways, so let's start at the beginning. And most places you find this on the internet, or at least I found, make slight mention of this. But a lot of them leave out the start of the story, and they say that everything kicks off in the early 1700s or mid 1700s, and that's simply inaccurate, especially if you were trying to say that this is a curse and where it came from. Because if you're not telling the story of where the curse came from,
what story
or
are
the
you
history
telling?
of the curse, then you're really just making stuff up. Or you're basically saying like all this stuff happened because of a curse, and here's all the crazy things, which is just incomplete. So this story really starts in the mid 1400s. So 300 years before the time it's supposed to start, according to the internet. And I do it like with quotes.
Why did you say it
Which
with
is
that
funny because I
voice?
found this stuff out from the internet too. So thank you, internet. Also, F you, internet. So it starts off with a real human being. This person actually existed. And they were named Edmund Dudley. Go figure. They were born to Sir John Dudley of Atherington. I think I said that right. And Elizabeth Bramshot. And I put her name in especially because a lot of times when you find this stuff from like 600-700 years ago, they don't even include the female's name, even if it directly happened to her. They
It'd
talk
be like
about
Dudley's wife.
Yeah, and I'm going to get to a part like that later on. And Edmund was born in 1462 or 1471.
Those are huge gaps.
Or 1472. No one is quite sure. And at this point, you're probably saying, like, I thought you said this is a real person. Why you got to make shit up if you can't even get
Why
the
you
birthday
gotta be so
right?
rude?
I don't know. It's just me. Well, dear listener, just have faith. We'll get to proof of his existence, even if we don't have the day he popped out. So, as the name would suggest, this is the Dudley line that would eventually make its way across the pond, supposedly. And how do I know this dude was real? How do I know he's wheel? Well,
He's a wheel of time.
wow. That's not your best work. You've had some next level shit these last 2 days, though. He was actually kind of famous. Like, he was kind of a big deal. And you might be saying, how big? Well, some of you might recognize the name Edmund Dudley because there's a lot of programs that have been made about the time he was alive.
What?
So how big was this guy? Well, the King of England at the time, which was Henry VII, made this dude a, quote, privy councillor, and he was only 23 years old. Which basically means he was a private advisor to the king, or even possibly a secret advisor. But I think he was pretty well known, so he just only gave his counsel like behind closed doors, essentially. And he had a nice body of work for the King of England that included like helping negotiate a treaty that ended one of England's many invasions in France.
Wow.
And he did other shit too, like nothing exciting or sexy, but most of the stuff that he did basically was figuring out ways to make people that weren't royalty pay money to the people that were for basically existing on the lands that they claimed that they had all the rights and titles to.
Yeah.
So he was, we're going to get to some other stuff too, where he's all about that life, about being royalty and making sure other people know it. So that sounds a little bit messed up, but it's even more messed up to know that this dude was actually, like, the title he had was, amongst others, Speaker of the House of Commons, And I just think it's so funny because you think the House of Commons should probably represent the common people, and the speaker, who's like the head of it, should probably be someone who's like, connected to them.
He's a prefect.
What's a prefect?
It's from Harry Potter.
Oh, man. It's just going to be nothing but... I thought it was prefect.
Oh, I call it a prefect.
In the
it's
movies,
probably a prefect.
I think in the movies
Prefect?
they say prefect, but who knows if that's correct. They're all just British and probably say things inaccurately in their own language.
Anecdote. My TA for my mechanics and materials class is from Tanzania, and he learned to say some things in like the British English and not American English. So words like aluminum, he's like, why do you guys say aluminum? Yeah, he's like, why do you guys say aluminum? I always say aluminium. I'm just like, I don't know, man.
There's no I at the end of it, though.
Yeah, it's like, but some words like jaguar.
We say wrong, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff that we do wrong, but we're going to keep going with this thing. So good anecdote. Anyways, so this guy is great, obviously. So we have Edmund Dudley, and I almost forgot his name. So what's the connection to Dudley Town? Obviously, they share the same name. Well, what is Dudley Town? Since I just mentioned this kind of in passing, well, calm down, listener. Geez, we're getting there. So King Henry VII died. I don't know if you realize that. He's not still alive 700 years later. And the new king, which was Henry VIII, charged Edmund Dudley with treason, and they locked his ass up in the Tower of London.
Wow.
Which happened a lot back then, in case you didn't know. So, and the Tower of London, BT dubs, is a topic all on its own that we could totally cover.
That dungeon was popping.
So, what did he do if he was charged with treason? Well, basically, and this is about the best approximation that I can give you folks, because there's so much research to be done on this topic, but he was just basically unpopular with Henry VIII. Like, you could say that he did things that annoyed Henry VIII, and the charge that he was supposedly there for was, like, gathering all his friends and family, like, to his side when the king was about to die, and he said, like, basically he was trying to overthrow him. And, like, later on, people came out and they're like, that never happened. King Henry VIII just did not like him, and we wanted him out of the way. And people weren't exactly sure why. But most of the stuff was nonsense. And, like, in case you guys haven't seen The Tudors, a lot of the shit is probably included in The Tudors. I've never seen most of it. Or, like, The Other Boleyn Girl. Like, this is all that time. Like, this is the dude. Like, King Henry VIII was at the center of all of this nonsense. So, did the charges of treason stick? Well, not all of them. And you'd think that they would, because the king is the one who said, like, he's treasonous, let's get rid of him. And usually when you're charged with treason, they strip you of land and titles. And they put that through to have all of this stuff stripped away from Edmund Dudley. And, like, Parliament needs to approve that because you're losing all your shit, and there needs to basically, whether or not it's checks and balances, just be, like, a form of process.
Okay.
And when it got to them, they're like, no, we don't approve this. Because even Parliament was like, this isn't real, man. Like, he might be a political opponent, and you're imprisoning him, but, like, so Edmund hears this and is like, yo, dog, like, I'm totally getting my charges dropped. Even Parliament knows this is nonsense. But some time went by, and he didn't get let out. So he was like, uh-oh. So he wound up writing something while he was locked up. And this is a real thing. It was authored by him, and this is direct proof of his existence, aside from all the other things that you can find. And this is called The Tree of Commonwealth. And he basically wrote it and hoped King Henry VIII would like it and let him out. What? No, I hate you so much. So I'm not going to tell you what all this thing is about, but some of this stuff is pertinent because I want you to know what kind of guy this guy is. Because right now you might be like, that's so sad. Like, he really didn't do anything wrong, and he got thrown in prison, basically. So this is the Cliff Notes version of the Tree of Commonwealth. There's 3 types of people according to this. There's the clergy, which is basically the church, and they're in charge of praying for everyone else to do well. Then there's the chivalry, which are rich people, royalty, knights, gentlemen, lords, ladies, and they need to essentially own everything. But their responsibilities include defending the realm in times of war. And in their defense, like, suits of armor were very expensive. So lords and, like, knights would go out and defend themselves. A lot of times they'd find, like, really good fighters.
All right.
And give them expensive things so they would fight for them. And that's where a lot of the families originated from.
It's like Tyrion bringing Bronn onto his team.
Kind of, yeah. Like, Bronn is a really good example of someone who would become a knight, and maybe later on down the line his family would become, like, royalty. But that said, like, obviously the chivalry isn't exactly the best, and he did write in this thing that another responsibility of theirs is not to abuse their power. So you're thinking, like, okay, he has some good ideas, and that's kind of cool. So the third thing he wrote about is the commonalty, or commonalty, which is just really weirdly spelled, which is everyone else, the non-royals. And what do they need to do according to this? They need to avoid greed, which sounds good, right? But specifically, they need to not want things that they aren't entitled to because of their birth. Like, if you're born poor, so you're poor. Stop wanting riches or wealth or to live a better life. Caste. It's stay in your lane, bro.
Okay.
And then they're supposed to keep their family. So if you have a family, like, make sure you can maintain for it. And then he puts basically live as well as your station allows you to without ever wanting a new station in life. And support everything the country needs because they're the backbone of literally everything because they do everything and provide everything, basically. And one nice highlight is the advice that he gives to the lower caste, and it's something that they should avoid. And I'm putting this in here because I really want you to know what kind of guy this guy was. So this is a quote. Quote, presumption above their degree. So he's not even talking to them. He's talking to the royalty about poor people. And he says that they were to avoid, quote, grudging and murmuring. And it's specifically about the fact that they are lowborn. And the last highlight is the following, in which he advises the lowborn to, quote, live in labor and pain, and for the most part of their time in the sweat of their face. Because that is what you are cursed to, because you were not born a royal. You're going to live in labor and pain and don't bitch and moan about it. And that's what he wrote. And like, this is published. You can go find this. And this is the mindset that he put out there to try and win the favor of the King of England, because all the royals were like, yeah, like that's exactly what they should do. Shut up and take care of us while we take all their money. And
shut up and dance with me.
I hate you so much. That did pop in my head when I was saying that. So at this point, I put in my script, what a douchebag. And as a quick reminder, this dude was the Speaker of the House of Commons. So this is just the mindset in like 1510 or whenever this is taking place, because he winds up getting imprisoned like at the end of the 1400s, mid 1500s. So this is real. You can totally go read this if you want to. And this is all interesting and great, but what does this have to do with scary-ish? Well, now that you hate him, allow me to tell you what happens next, because you might appreciate it more. So King Henry VIII does not release him like he thought he might. And on August 17th, 1510, which is hilarious to me because we don't know the day he was born, but we definitely know the day he was beheaded for treason.
I think that happens a lot. People care more about like their brutal death than the birth of their existence.
Their common birth, where it's just like, okay, they came into the world and nothing of note happened. So it's lost to time. But we know he was beheaded, which anyone who knows anything about King Henry VIII was a theme, because that would happen a lot.
Oh, really?
Yeah. King Henry VIII
was he the crazy king?
He was the one who had 5 wives, and when he did not like them, he'd just take their heads off and marry another one.
Is he the one that changed the
church?
Yeah, right.
So he could get divorces, because disvorces would like disfellowship him from the church, and he was like, we'll make our own church, one that lets me behead, divorce, and bang new chicks. So, and in that order.
My hero.
He's just such a scumbag. So anyways, he beheads our Dudley here, our Edmund Dudley, who is the beginning of our story. And not just that, but apparently a curse is placed on the family. And what kind of curse, you ask? Did the king do it himself? Did they bring in like a freelance witch? Or maybe he had like a warlock on hand or a shadow priest? I don't know. But regardless, whatever dot they put on this guy, that means damage over time, dot. It's a reference to WoW.
Yeah.
Huge nerd. But it stuck. And how so? Well, I'm going to tell you now, because now we're into curse territory. So
I feel like you have to explain what damage over time is.
It's just a spell where any spell you put on someone that's not an instant hit, it's going to like tick away at them. It's basically putting a sickness on them that eats away at whatever.
Like poison or something like that.
Anyways, so Edmund had 4 kids before he died. He had Elizabeth, John, Andrew, and Jerome, which are fairly normal names for the 1500s.
Yeah.
So Edmund's son, John, was a plotter and a schemer as well. And he plotted and schemed to have his son, Guildford, which is just a name that needs to make a comeback, because I love that name. He plotted to have him get hitched to Lady Jane Grey, and it worked. He got married when he was 18 to Lady Jane Grey, who was 16 at the time. So Guildford, who's the grandson of Edmund, is in great position. And you might say, well, who's Lady Jane Grey? And some of you might be history buffs or TV fans, and it might ring a bell. And if it doesn't, let me explain. And to avoid complications, because there's so many complications during this time, I'm going to make this as straightforward as possible. So this is Tudor shit. If you want a full accounting of this, go ahead and watch that show, because things got really wild. So the King of England was Henry VIII. He has Edmund's head cut off.
Okay.
John's the son. John's like, I'm not going to mess with him, but I'm going to position my family. I hate you so much. He's going to position his family to eventually find themselves in a seat of power. So King Henry VIII dies, and his son takes over. His son is named Edward, and his son was Edward VI, if you want to look him up. When he took over as King of England, he was a 9, which means obviously he can't rule. So think like Game of Thrones. Think Tommen, the Child King, and Cersei is like Queen Regent, where she's really running shit, waiting for him to be old enough to take charge. Same exact thing, except rather than having one Queen Regent, there were a bunch of people. There are actually 16. Not going to get into any of them. They don't matter.
Okay.
They might if you really want to know the history behind this, but regarding the curse, they don't matter. So Edward's immune system sucks. So 1553 hits, and he gets sick. I think he's 16 at the time. So he's still very young. And he's just not going to get better. And he knows it. And for many reasons, mainly the fact that his dad was a huge slut, he was like, I'm going to say my half-sisters, Mary and Elizabeth, won't take over when I die. They only have half a claim. And on top of that, like, because
so if
so
they
many
come together, then they have a whole claim.
I hate you so much. If they use the fusion dance or the earrings. But no, what he was basically saying is like, they only have half of a claim. And on top of that, like, my dad's marriages were kind of like scratched from the record and said they were illegitimate, so they kind of maybe don't even have a claim, and it's just an awkward situation. So when I die, I want my cousin to take over. Who was his cousin? Lady Jane Grey.
Okay.
The wife of Guildford. So we have a Dudley now who is positioned to possibly become king.
Okay.
So this Dudley like curse goes way back, and it's very, very big. And guess what happens? Edward dies, and they take over. Dudley is king. He is king, and Lady Jane Grey is king. Queen, my bad. And her reign lasts from July 10th, 1553 till July 19th, 1553. 9 days, which is shorter than the month-long president who's up in that attic like, this is horse shit. I'm not Lady Jane Grey.
Oh my goodness.
So what happened? Well, this is what happened. To put it very bluntly, Mary, one of those half-sisters, Edward was like, nah, bitch. She shows up and she was like, oh, yes, bitch. I think so. She shows up and she's like, I'm in charge. Fall in line, everyone. Now go and arrest the king and the queen and lock them up right now. She got imprisoned because Mary showed up and was just like, you guys follow me now. And they decided to say yes. Like, okay, we'll follow her instead. They imprisoned the sitting king and sitting queen after 9 days. Like, they had a really good run. And we're going to skip over all the other insane bullshit that happened. And we're going to stick with the Dudleys. So John Dudley, the dad, who's the son of Edmund, who had been plotting but didn't really have anything to do. Okay. And Guildford, they don't have the best of time. The dad, John, is executed on August 22nd, 1553. The beheading, of course. His head was taken. The charge, treason. His son, Guildford, the rightful king at this point, and such a good name, was executed February 12th. Guildford.
You think that's a good name?
Yeah, I'm shocked that I've said that 10 times, and this is the first time you've questioned me on it. But he is executed February 12th, 1554, so only 6 months later. How? Beheading, charge, treason. So this curse that was supposedly placed on the family has claimed this guy's son and his grandson for the exact same reason, and they were killed in the exact same way. Side note, an hour later, Jane, the true queen, was also executed the same way for the same charge. Side note, the royalty in this time were insane.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. There was one show I was watching that was about the Queen of Scots, Mary. I forget what it was called, but it's on Netflix. I don't know. But that king is insane.
Yeah.
That king is absolutely insane.
It's just the most bizarre stuff, and it just gets worse and worse. So, okay, what about the other Dudleys? Well, there was a lot, and we're not going to look at all of them because John was one of the kids I mentioned. Edmund had 4 kids, right? John himself alone had 12 children. Guildford was one of them, the 9-day king. And another, and not sure which, I've looked them up, and it doesn't state exactly which one, but he was a military man, which his dad was too. His dad was involved in a lot of battles. But one of his sons was also a military man, and he came home from fighting in France around this time. And he brought a friend with him, and the friend's name was the Plague. And his
I was
plague,
like, what? That's a weird name.
The plague he brought back with him spread to other enlisted military personnel.
It was like the plague?
Yeah, and it killed so many, like tens of thousands of people.
We went over this. We had an episode
I
about
know,
it.
and they basically, people still think of him as like patient zero in the spot because he came back with it. And it's another one of those reasons where, like, you fight, you're fatigued, so your immune system doesn't kick up and fight it off as much as it can, so you become a carrier. So, okay, let's take a breath. Let's take our nerd noses out of these history books and flip some pages. By the way, everything I just told you is 100% true and accurate. You can find it documented wherever you want to. So, We're flipping some pages, and we have now flipped to the mid-1700s.
We're also flipping some lids.
Okay, I hope so. I hope someone's like, this is crazy, and not like, this is so boring. So we're early 1747
Someone's out
now.
there saying that.
Someone's like, I hate this, and I hate him so much. Early 1747. Life is not going well in England for the descendants of House Dudley. And that is to say, like, not well enough to stay. Like, they decided they're going to head for this new world they keep hearing about. Now, at this point, I do need to pause because I would be remiss if I didn't mention one particular thing. And that is that it is said that these Dudleys, which is around 200 to 250 years later, may have actually not been related to Edmure Dudley. In fact, one of the recorded descendants of this particular group that are about to immigrate to America, which do exist, wrote a book a couple of decades ago to prove that there is no connection because he wants to get rid of the whole Dudleytown curse thing.
Oh, wow.
And supposedly in it, there's a lot of genealogy, and I am a skeptic, so I do appreciate this attention to detail and this quest for facts. And that said, this definitely sounds like something a cursed relative would do to make you think they're not cursed. I am on to you, Reverend Gary P. Dudley, the author of The Legend of Dudleytown, a book that uses scientific genealogy to debunk the connection. Likely story. He's probably right. So anyways, as much as I'd like to say that this stone cold research, the Dudleys are not related, they did spread like wildfire throughout Europe. They were everywhere. Like, there was an account that there was actually 13 kids from John, but one of them was illegitimate, but they still had a claim because they were a male. There was all these other things, like all the other, like the kids had more kids, and you can just imagine it multiplying like rabbits, okay? So the idea that they have such accurate records stating like there is absolutely no way the Dudleys from England are the Dudleys from England. Like, there's no way that connection is made.
Okay.
And that's basically what this book is about. So that said, we're on to him. We're going to keep moving on with this curse because there's so many Dudleys. So there's a man named Gideon Dudley, and he's a supposed descendant and, of course, carrier of the Dudley curse. And he travels to the New World to find their home. And he finds a nice plot of land in Cornwall, Connecticut, and just looks at it and is like, this is going to make a wonderful place for this curse to take hold.
Oh, no.
And he makes what we'll call a settlement. And I'm going to call it that because even though it's called Dudleytown, this place never actually gets incorporated or becomes like a town officially. It's fairly small. And eventually...
Still, now, to this day.
It doesn't exist anymore.
Oh.
We'll get there.
Oh, okay.
So eventually, and this is a really odd name that I've never seen before, Barzalia, it's Barzillai, Dudley, and Abiel, Abiel Dudley, come over in 1753, and Martin Dudley, who I think lives in like Massachusetts, which is, by the way, way too normal of a name for these Dudleys because these Dudleys all have like kind of weird names. Gideon's fairly normal.
And then they have one named Belial.
No. So Martin comes over too. So there's some Dudleys in this place, and like most other settlements, other people live here. Other families have moved in and brought their friends to like make a living. But at this point, because everyone's come over there, this settlement becomes known as Dudleytown. And this is where the whole curse of Dudleytown thing comes in.
They're all just a bunch of duds.
But the Dudleys are, they're like, we're in charge. I hate you so much. Like, we're in charge. Like, hopefully you have things to give us because that's what we're used to. But it's really more of a community where, like, you have to actually own stuff. You have to actually provide for things. And we're going to get to...
So.
That's, honestly, they're a family that's like, we do not sow. And so many of them are like that. But it doesn't exactly work out for them in Dudleytown, or at least for some of them. And, like, it's not a shocker that this wonderful environment of support and love didn't keep the curse out. So... I forgot to mention, too, the location of the village was a valley called, no bullshit, the Dark Entry Forest.
What is this, a video game?
Which just bodes so well. Like, why in the holy hell would you live somewhere called the Dark Entry Forest? This is like pre-revolution times, which means there's demons everywhere. Like, that's just poor decision making. So anyways, back to the curse. Regardless of whether this connection is real, why did people think it was real? Well, believe it or not, living in a place where the mountains cast an almost persistent shadow on the village had its drawbacks, hence the name that it's been given. So, the Dudley curse seemed to have effects on the town. And when you think of the 1750s and forward, you probably think, has McDonald's been around that long? Did they like have bad fast food or how's that work? No, like if you want food, you're going to have to grow it or trade for it. So typically if you want to trade for it, you have to have some different type of resource to trade, which they did. But they did not have any sort of food to trade. Because it just wasn't going well. Things just did not grow well there. Crops just died or didn't take root. And maybe it's the lack of sunlight because they're always in the shadow. Maybe it's bad soil because it's so close to like a mountainous range and it's very rocky. Or maybe it's this supposed curse. And this is not to say...
Curse.
We're just going to go with curse. So it's not to say that Dudleytown didn't have things to give. Like I mentioned, they had things. They had wood. I mean, it's a new settlement in the United States before it's even the United States, so it's just surrounded by forested lands.
They're just like, murder the trees.
Pretty much. Murder the trees and sell the trees. Everyone likes tree. And they do. And then they also found that they had iron. So it actually wasn't that bad at all because they did have a little bit of industry within the town that they could all support themselves, even though it was like very, very hard work. And having a product to trade and an abundance of it is a good thing. And it helps you ignore the bad stuff, like bad soil that won't grow crops or voices coming from the woods. Like, what? Yeah, I just said that. You heard me right. Some towns have like birds chirping all the time and it's really annoying. Like, not Dudleytown. In fact, I read a couple of accounts of people going there recently, like 2018 recently, and it's mentioned like repeatedly that to this day, when they go to visit this place, which by the way, you're not allowed to do,
what?
They never hear a bird or see a squirrel or hear like animal wildlife, which should be abundant there. Because at this point, like the forest has pretty much reclaimed it, and we'll get to there.
Whoa.
It's just one of those really silent places that's very, very eerie because it should not be. And that's what they said about this place. And they said that they could hear whispering from the woods.
Shut up.
So it sounds like this curse just like seeped into this town. Like it really feels that way to me. And it was like, it's supposed to be a family curse, but now it's the area. And maybe it's all nonsense. And maybe the curse never existed in the first place and people just like carried it on talking about it by connecting like further unfortunate events with the family name that like persists throughout history.
Yeah.
Or maybe Gideon like made his pilgrimage to America. And I know this is dark and a little bit fantasy oriented, but maybe he found a place and was like, I think we can desecrate this place and leave this curse behind.
That's
like
fucked.
Rid ourselves of this family curse. And maybe that's me just like trying to put a spin on this to make it fun. But hey, I played D&D games where I had a character that had to desecrate an entire town to do something just like that. So
What?
I totally thought of that when I was doing this. Shout out to Eric, my first ever DM. So did I mention...
Have I met this person?
You never met Eric. No.
Okay.
Did I mention that they never, ever built any churches in the entire town?
Whoa.
Not one holy place in this entire town.
A settlement coming over from England.
Not a one.
Wow.
And to be fair, they didn't have a lot of things, but that one in particular strikes me as odd.
That is super weird.
Because there were so many Protestants at the time, especially in the
Yes.
area, that were very, very religious. And maybe that's why people went here, because there's no churches. Like, we don't have to worry about like people like having a witch trial and setting us on fire. But they also didn't have like stores or shops or schools.
So what was the point of the settlement?
It's like, it was basically like a mining settlement almost, but it was set up before they realized they had these things just to gather people.
Mining settlements even have stores.
Yeah. And then they would take anything that they needed. They didn't have a cemetery. If you died, they moved you to one of the nearby towns to bury you.
Whoa.
No church, no cemetery, nothing normal in this place. And that strikes me as more
This is
desecrated
cool,
land than
yeah.
other stuff. That's just a really bizarre thing. So there's no churches. There was supposedly, though, voices that emanate from the woods, and that's not that bad, right? I mean, if you ignore them, you're pretty good. And some people supposedly listened to them and heard what they were saying, and they, of course, went mad. They went insane. The town had a lot of problems with people going crazy, and there was also an extremely high percentage, and I say that and take it with a grain of salt, because the population, I think, at max is like 25 to 30 families, and anything that happens there is going to be abnormally high. If there's a bunch of people that get skin knees, it's going to be like, our skin-knee ratio is just super high. But yeah, they had a super high rate of suicide in Dudleytown.
Oh my goodness.
And those
This
voices...
is like creepy.
It is very creepy. And these voices apparently like had a source. And according to William Tanner, who was an actual resident of the town that existed at the time, there were, quote, strange creatures that would emerge from the darkness at night and come into the town. When I heard that...
It was a nidus canal.
Oh, wow. It's funny. When I heard that, I thought a little bit of The Village, like what The Village's premise was supposed to be. Like there were creatures in the woods that kept everyone inside.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the M. Night Shyamalan Ding Dong twist really pissed me off. But anyways, so supposedly these creatures would sneak into the town at night. And they're supposedly the sources of the voices and the cause of much of the illness that would be seen in a large portion of the population, because people would get sick here abnormally frequently, especially for like the 1750s when toe foot turned into knee leg all the goddamn time. So that said, I want to bring up two things about this. William Tanner, this eyewitness, he died at 104 years old.
So he lived through
He
shit.
was old. So it's very possible that
He's
some of these
seen
things that he said were a little bit crazy near the end there. Not every person that lives to be 104 becomes senile.
But was he saying all this stuff before?
He was saying these are the things he saw in this town. And he would tell people that. He told people along the way to his 104-year-old death, and especially when he got there. And secondly, a town that seems to get sick consistently does sound something like, wow, that does sound cursed.
Maybe it's because they didn't have healthy alternatives.
That's literally what I put down. It's like they didn't have any medical expertise. It's the 1700s, and so maybe it has less to do with a curse. Like, if you work in an office building and you are patient zero for any cold or flu, by the time that cold or flu has circled its way all the way through the workforce, it might have changed and mutated enough that you can catch it again. Some people have been like, I started the cold and then I caught it again after I was healthy. Like, that can happen. And because there was illness in Dudleytown, like, that could be the case.
Yeah.
It's very, like, concealed, so it might just be that people weren't getting healthy before they went back out to do things, and they were infecting the non-sick, or people that were just recently sick with weakened immune systems with whatever new strand they've contracted. And especially because they have to travel to do so much stuff, like bury the dead. So, let's move back to this. There was illness in Dudleytown and madness. We've talked about that.
I'm just thinking about the Kingdom show that we've been watching, how they take that one dead body from that place and bring
Chop
it to
up.
Yeah, and then feed oh man.
Spoilers. That's the very beginning, though. You should really watch The Kingdom. It's subtitled, but it's
so
really good. So, anyways, we had illness. We have madness. And people would also, on occasion, just disappear. They would just vanish.
There's something wrong with
and
this
no
place.
one knew where they went. So, obviously, there's chatter of a curse. And maybe they just left because, like, screw that place. I wouldn't want to live there. But people would say that their friends or their family members would just vanish. And I was thinking about this, and it must have been really easy to disappear back then. Like, you could literally move like 5 miles away to another town and wear a fake mustache and just rename yourself like Guy Incognito, and you'd just be set. Like, you'd never have to worry about anyone ever finding you again. That's also a Simpsons reference. But speaking of moving away, all the Dudleys moved away, but one. And when the other Dudleys moved away, they didn't have any tragedy befall them. They just moved on and lived ordinary lives and died ordinary deaths. So it really kind of feels like they left this curse behind. But the Dudley that stayed was Abiel. I have no idea if I'm saying his name right. It's Abiel. I was thinking I would just call him Abe, but we just talked about Abraham Lincoln, and I don't want you folks to get confused. Things did not go great for Abiel when he stayed here. Despite being of means and having money, obviously he traveled across and like they owned Dudleytown basically. He somehow wound up so deep in debt, he lost all of his land and the places that he lived.
Wow.
And this happened really fast. Like, they got there in like 1753, I think is when he came over. So this happened still in the 1750s. But he still stayed in Dudleytown, making ends meet somehow for another 40 years. He was there when he died. He died there in 17...
Did he have kids and stuff?
I don't know. I don't think he did, actually. I couldn't find anything about him in particular and his, like, offspring, but he died in 1799. He was 90 years old when he died.
Man, they lived long lives.
They lived long lives, even for the current times. And this is 1700s, 1800s. Like, we were just about to get into
They're
the 1800s.
legends at that point.
Yeah, they're like, that old man has seen some stuff. But...
It's Deckard Cain.
right? But maybe with that death, with Abiel passing away, the town had finally and officially inherited this curse. And maybe I'm just making up some bullshit. Or maybe it just needed to go somewhere. Like, something bad just needs to land somewhere, you know? It's like the Shawshank Redemption when he says, like, it's bad luck. It floats around and it needs to land on someone, which is one of the saddest lines in that movie. Because, like, he didn't do anything wrong, damn it. Anyways, so he's gone now. There's no more Dudleys left in Dudleytown. So... what happens with, like, all the land he lost? Well, it goes up for sale, like most things do when they've been forfeited because of debt. And the house he had lived in prior to this misfortune sold in 1759. 1759 is obviously not long after he had been there, but it was sold to a new family, and this gentleman that bought it was named Nathaniel Carter. This is entirely true.
I like that name.
I did a lot of research on this one. It was a pain in the butt, but I found that all these people actually existed, and I verified a lot of things. The things I was not able to verify, I will tell you the discrepancy. So here we go. Nathaniel had family in Dudleytown. He had some other Carters in Dudleytown that he wanted to move close to. So what could go wrong, right? You're near your family. It's like kind of a podunk town, but hey, you're together. Well, something happened. You remember that unnamed son of John's that returned back from France?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was something like that. They called it a plague.
Oh.
It was most certainly a disease that hit Dudleytown and its small population and some of the nearby towns as well after Nathaniel had moved his family in. And his relatives... that he moved there to be around died during this time. And no one was quite sure what caused it or why, but it killed off multiple families in that town and the surrounding area. So Nathaniel, who didn't lose any of his family, was like, or his direct family, you know, like his kids, his wife.
Right, his nuclear family.
Exactly. He was basically like, nope, we're out, F this. And he packed up his family and they moved yet again 4 years later. I keep saying 19, but 15, 18? Oh, Christ. I'm so lost now. 1863. There we go. 1763. Shit. Mark that. So 1763, he moves his family away. I'm probably just going to leave it in because I'm so stupid. Anyway, 1753. Shit. 1763. Where the fuck am I?
Oh, my Lanta.
I'm having a stroke right now. I smell blue. Okay.
Did you say you smell blue? What? Get out.
Reset. 1763. Nathaniel decides to move his family away from this horrible cursed town known as Dudleyville. And even though they left Dudleytown, god damn it. Okay. I keep wanting to call it Dudleyville and I don't know why. So they moved to another remote location. They didn't move to like a big city. They stayed like rural. And some say that it was in the state of New York. I have also seen it said it was in the state of Delaware. Others say they were still in Connecticut, but just further away from Dudleytown. What I do know beyond the shadow of a doubt is that bad luck stuck with them because around 1780, the local Native Americans nearby where they had relocated to started raiding several settlements and private homes. And during this raid, Nathaniel was killed, as was his wife and their infant child. That said, side note, I found a genealogy site that claims that Nathaniel was not killed, gives a different date for his death, but he was taken, eventually released by the Native Americans that had captured him, and after he was released, later returned to the tribe that took him and stayed with them until he died.
What?
This part is unclear about Nathaniel's final fate. What is clear is the fact that he had 3 other children aside from his infant that passed away. He had 2 daughters whose, of course, names are unable to be located because they never mention female names in this time, and he had a son named David. The daughters were ransomed back and given back and released. David was kept. They kept David Carter. He went on to marry one of the Native American girls that he was raised around. He then left the tribe to get a formal education, returned, and eventually became, and this is not bullshit, this is 100% true, Chief Justice of the Cherokee Supreme Court
That's incredible.
And a delegate to Washington, D.C. His parents were murdered, maybe just half of them. His infant sibling was murdered. He was taken, and he still wound up marrying a Native American, becoming Chief Justice of the Cherokee Supreme Court, and was a delegate to Washington. That's incredible.
That is incredible.
But it's still bizarre because his family was
and I'm
murdered.
sitting here making jump change.
Right? And this dude struggled, man. But, I mean, he wound up being the Chief Justice. He wound up staying with the tribe, and he eventually died and was buried, like, on tribal lands.
Wow.
It's just bizarre
this is like
stuff.
History
This
episode.
is, and this is very historical stuff. That's why I was like, this is so weird because these people existed. Like, this stuff is just true. Like, whether or not it's related to a curse, it's so many bizarre things that happened. So what else happened? Well, another thing that happened near Dudleyville, almost in Dudleyville, but not exactly within like settlement limits. So people say like, well, that wasn't really Dudleyville, so you can't count that. But this is something that did happen, and it happened to General Heman Swift. That's right, Heman, not Herman, as so many sites list him as. His name literally spells out He-Man. So Get it right, people. He served for George Washington, for God's sake. The least you can do is get his name right. Also, this really didn't happen to him. I'm again telling you about something that happened to a female, and it doesn't even list her name in most places. I had to dig to find her name. It happened to his wife. In 1804, this is 100% true, Sarah Fay, which was her name, stepped out onto their front porch, probably thinking to herself at the time, you know, this place isn't that bad.
Did she get shot?
At which point she was struck by lightning and killed instantly.
What are the odds?
It wasn't like she survived and lived a horrible life. No, she got struck by lightning and died. She might not have thought realistically like this place isn't so bad, but she was struck by lightning on her porch and killed in 1804.
Goodness. What are the odds?
General Heman lived another 8 years, just long enough to, whether through supernatural causes or simply old age, go insane and die. So, side note, this is 100% true, like I mentioned. She was struck and killed by lightning. Even the skeptical historical sites, I should say, that I found that tell you about the history of this place are like, yeah, this did happen. But, I mean, lightning strikes do happen to people, right? It's like, yeah, they do. But in this particular case, everyone's going to take something that's bizarre that's happened in Dudleytown or near Dudleytown as something supernatural.
She was just like, oh, smite me.
Oh, smite me, mighty smiter. That's a Bruce Almighty reference. So Dudleytown would limp on for some time, but as time moves forward, The simple facts of life pulled people away. The iron industry started to dwindle a little bit. People were moving west to strike it rich for gold. The life Dudleytown had to offer was not so enticing as more as it was challenging. So by the 1870s, 1880s, which is around the time the Civil War was wrapping up, Dudleytown was essentially a ghost town. And there were still some people hanging on, and like a lot of the myths come from this time as well, after the Civil War era where there's not a whole lot of people left. And people did suffer tragedies. And as it's retold, supernatural stuff gets added in over time, but a lot of times people make up names because they just know it's like a pass
Sam and
through.
Dean just come in and
it's one of those time travel episodes and it just gets really weird.
We gotta catch up to the Scooby-Doo episode.
We're so far in. We're almost 11 seasons into Supernatural at this point, and man, it's just getting rough. But anytime something happens here, basically people at this point are chalking it up to being supernatural. So a lot of times too, like, people are disappearing, and when you look into this, it's actually they committed crimes, and yeah, they just disappear, quote unquote. But yeah, kind of. In context, they ran away from their consequences. So other things occurred here as well that aren't as well documented, like a man named Dr. William C. Clark, and he is documented. He bought the land that Dudleytown was located on in 1906. So we're finally up to the 19, so I can stop saying the wrong beginning to all these damn centuries. There is a legend about him that many places, including the society that he founded, and he founded this to basically turn this land into a nature preserve, refutes. And that legend is that he had a home there in 1918 on the land that Dudleyville resided on, or formerly resided on, and his wife stayed in the home with him, and he went on a business trip. He was gone for 36 hours. When he came home, he found his wife in a deranged state, claiming that strange creatures had emerged from the woods and attacked her. And soon after this, she never recovered mentally, and she ended her own life.
Wow.
That is the legend or the myth. It's almost certainly bullshit, but that said, I was unable to locate any genealogy for Dr. Clark or an obituary for either himself or his wife, so I can't 100% confirm it's not true. What I can say is the society that he founded that exists to this day for the preservation of this area states flat out that it's not true, and that it was made up originally by someone that I'm going to get to here in a little bit. So there was even a summer camp there in the 1930s, which I doubt he would let happen if this is the place where your wife committed suicide and he's like the leader of this like organization that he created. It's not Organization 13 or anything, but like he created this organization to protect it. I've just been watching her play so much Kingdom Hearts. That said, if you're thinking like, this sounds horrific, this place sounds bizarre, I have to go here. I have very bad news for you. Because of stupid people acting like assholes, and there's no other way to put it, the owners of the land of Dudleytown basically have closed it off to the public entirely. And they said that around the turn of the millennia, so like 1999 to 2000, people began exploring areas for haunted forests, and this is almost certainly because of the Blair Witch Project. And anyone who was around when that came out knows what a big hype it was. But like most people who have no respect for anything that isn't theirs, they decided that trespassing wasn't enough, and they needed to vandalize things as well. So anything that was left of Dudleytown has been vandalized like beyond recognition, which sucks. And thanks, guys. You ruined it for everyone, because that would have been a really cool place to tour.
Yeah.
And before I wrap up, there are multiple sites that claim that the curse of Dudleytown wasn't even spoken of until 1926. So what happened then? Well, a guy named Edward C. Starr published a work called The History of Cornwall, which is the nearby town, which is the area that he came to back in the day when Gideon showed up and was like, this is where I want my curse to go. And in the work History of Cornwall, Edward C. Starr speaks of Dudleytown and writes of this curse, and it's like supposedly the first time the account is ever written down. And even in this, he doesn't really call it a curse. He kind of calls it like a center for bad luck, so to speak, where it's like a lot of things happen, and gives anecdotes of like misfortune entering people's lives when they're in the town or when they move to it or right after leaving it, things like that. And he kind of gathered up a lot of these folk tales that people have basically been talking about for a long time.
Yeah.
But a lot of sites say like no one had ever mentioned anything like this before this work came out, which isn't exactly necessarily true. It's just the first time it was published. They say, though, that this is the first time anyone had ever said that Dr. Clark's wife had committed suicide, and no one knew why exactly they would come up with this like tale of BS. And I was like, well, then I feel like it's my responsibility to do my due diligence and see if I can find a cause of death for her, a time of death, or anything like that. But it's hard to find. Yeah. It really is. There's a lot of stuff from the early 1900s that you just can't find. It might be out there, but honestly, I can't tell you one way or the other. But a lot of places say like this is total BS. So that said, you've had both sides of this now. You've had like the legend, you've had sort of like the refute of the legend and things like that. But like, did the Dudleys of Dudleytown descend from Edmund Dudley? Well, they were all very real people. I can say that definitively. And they all resided in the same area, and they all came from the same spot at different times. But I can't be sure without busting out the old credit card and paying for genealogy reports. So for the time being, I'll remain skeptical of the connection while also remaining skeptical of the debunking all at once. Because let's be honest, like if you were cursed, you wouldn't want to tell people you were cursed. You'd be like, no, I'm good, dog. Like, I'm good. Let me in. And,
were you a vampire?
Exactly. And in a time, especially, and this like came to me right at the end of writing this, but in a time where anyone that was in power basically saying to themselves, I want more power, they would just have someone accused, imprisoned, and executed for treason constantly, which is the time that Edmund Dudley existed, you know? And it happened to him and his family, like literally his son and his grandson. It happened to them too. I trust absolutely nothing that is documented from this time, you know? It's completely plausible the documents were manipulated to disconnect a family's claim to the throne, which everyone was vying for. And it's like you just made up whatever nonsense you needed to. So why wouldn't you just make up nonsense to say like these people have no claim? Yeah. Especially when at one point a king sat on the throne for 9 days that was legitimately picked to be the succession and was taken out of the way. Like, nope, no more. And now we look back at it and it's like, even though they came from the same area and have the same last name and they had like similar means, like, no, they're not connected. I just don't buy that 100%. It's almost likely, in fact, that some form of sabotage like this existed. But like we usually say, it could be bullshit.
Yeah.
But I made sure that nearly all of the things that I did tell you actually happened and it was actually real people. So despite my skepticism, what I can say 100% for sure that this is a really good story. And it's
really interesting.
There's a lot of basis behind this idea that it's not just the curse of Dudleytown, but like the curse of the Dudleys. So that's about as much research as I could possibly do on a cell phone. And there was a lot here. So I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope it didn't put you to sleep. But that is everything I have for the curse of the Dudleys.
Nice.
Thank you.
Good job. We definitely hope y'all enjoyed this President's Day kind of historical tribute episode.
This was a lot of research, a lot of historical facts and dates, and I had my meltdown earlier where I couldn't figure out what century it was, so it was a fun time, though.
Yeah, it was good. So if you guys want to listen to any more episodes, go to Spotify. Our podcast is on Spotify.
Just search Scary-ish.
Anywhere you can find podcasts, really, I'm pretty sure.
You can also listen to it on YouTube if for whatever reason all the other sites are blocked with YouTube. All of our episodes go up there. You can watch the live episodes of Storytime. You can watch the edited episodes of Storytime. Whatever you like, they're all up there. But yeah, you can find us all those different places. Please go to iTunes and rate and review us. Give us the old 5-star if you can. If you enjoy us, we appreciate the 5 stars. So that really does help out podcasts, and it's a really good thing to do, especially if you can't contribute anything monetarily, but you want to. This is a really good way to take care of us. It really does mean a lot as well. So
and if you want to help support us keep making content, go to patreon.com/scaryish-podcast. We have a whole bunch of different tiers. If you want to make one-time donations to help us upgrade our studio setup, go to ko-fi.com, ko-fi.com/scaryish-podcast. One-time donations help us get lights and things that we need for the studio.
Indeed. We have some shadows right now that I can't wait to get rid of with some backlighting. I will say, too, for our patrons...
You can't get rid of all the shadows.
For our patrons, we have 2 things going on for our patrons right now. One, last Storytime, I think it was, Robin... I don't know. Maybe it wasn't Storytime. Whatever
we didn't announce
it
on Storytime or
anything. No. This is something different. Whatever it was, Robin was reading... And when Robin has some dead air, and I think most of us have heard of it at this point, she covers up her dead air by like humming or singing or scatting, and she hit this really nice note. And as I was editing, like I decided I was going to leave it in so you folks could hear it. And we kept going, and I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go back and just snag that part.
Remix.
And I pulled out like the second of her singing, and I remixed it into like 16 seconds of a beat. And I put it up there for patrons only. It's really, really funny. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. And on top of that, we haven't announced this yet, but we're having a giveaway, which we do every now and then. I think it's like a seasonal giveaway is what we put up on the tiers, which is just every season, so to speak. We just pick all the names that are active patrons, which is just anyone that's still signed up that hasn't like deleted the donation, basically, and pick one at random. And you guys get like a little, I don't want to call it a gift package, but it's some curated stuff that we have around.
A couple things that we will send you. So.
Yeah. Some good stuff, though. So if you want to become a patron, that's a really good thing. And that said, if you want to send us your homegrown horrors, you can email storytime@scaryish.com. Go to the website, scaryish.com. Fill out the contact us form. Go to facebook.com/scaryish-podcast. Message us there. You can join the Spooky Friends group from there. You can join our Discord by going to scaryish.com. Twitter is @scaryish-pod. Instagram is @scaryish-podcast. Robin is about to explode. She needs to pee, so we need to wrap this up. I'll take the ending. Keep on creeping on, and we'll see you next week.